China imports a huge amount of oil to put into its internal combustion engine vehicles, its diesel and gasoline powered vehicles. But analysts are quite shocked because consumption of petrol, gasoline and oil in China is falling much quicker than they had anticipated. Hello, my friends. Welcome to the channel. I'm Sam Evans. You're watching the Electric Viking. Great to have you with us. If you want to become a member of the channel, that'll be amazing. I'll put a link in the description below and that will help support the channel. So please click and become a member. The electric car boom is causing fuel consumption in China to fall much sooner than expected, says Spiegel in Germany. So the Germans are watching China and they're going, that's how it's meant to be done. In fact, Germany is also saying things about Norway where they're like, well, we wish we were Norway. But here's the thing. Norway is not a car manufacturer. So Germany is a little bit jealous of these Chinese vehicle manufacturers because they're taking enormous market share from German car companies. For decades, though, China has boosted global oil consumption, and that's helped these oil companies. Now, according to industry data, demand is weakening, and it's weakening fast. In fact, one of the high-ranking executives at China's largest oil company says that demand for oil in China will decrease by 5% over the next few years and then 10% after that. That shows you, even the Chinese themselves are saying the internal combustion engine vehicle and oil production, as a result, will decline significantly. This is evidently due to the rapid move in China away from the combustion engine. This is good news. I mean, if you live in China, you live in cities over there, guys, it's so different. If you went to China, say 10 or 15 years ago, even 5 years ago, you breathe the air in cities and not very good, right? Not great. You're thinking to yourself, I'm poisoning myself here. Same thing in Bangkok, same thing in Indian cities like Delhi. But it's not really like that anymore. It's changing really fast. In fact, the last time I was there, Guangzhou, major city, I don't remember ever noticing gasoline or diesel fumes. I mean, it was shocking. It's so much better. It's still got a long way to go, but it's really, really improving and it's so much nicer to walk around. In China, the move away from the combustion engine is already ushering in a new era in energy consumption. China is installing the equivalent in wind and solar to 5 nuclear power plants every single week. So it's moving away from purchasing oil from overseas major oil companies to simply creating its own energy for its vehicle fleet. This makes a lot of sense. According to current data from the country's largest oil company, around 1.5% less oil was consumed for refined products in 2024 than in the previous year, i.e. 394 million instead of about 400 million tons. Now, that's not a big difference, but as China electrifies its car fleet, and it's doing that at a record pace, I mean, it hit 56% in terms of percentage of EVs sold in the last couple of months of the year. As soon as China's hitting that 70-80%, we're going to see demand for refined oil products in China literally collapse within probably 5 years. The calculations come from a research institute of the national oil company, China National Petroleum Corporation. This means that the peak in fossil fuel consumption in China has already happened. According to CNPC, one of the main reasons for this is the growing number of electric cars. The research institute expects the trend to continue and, in fact, to accelerate. Gasoline consumption will fall by 35 to 50% to 80 to 100 million tons by 2035. So that's a pretty interesting prediction. I mean, they're basically saying there's a very, very good chance that gasoline consumption will fall by 50% by 2035, 10 years from now. That's huge. If you're invested in an oil company, maybe it's time to move on from that, right? The good days are coming to an end. Diesel demand is expected to fall by a similar amount to 100 to 120 million tons in decline. So around a 50% decline for diesel as well. Total consumption of fossil refinery products in turn will fall by up to 40% to 240 to 290 million tons. A 40% decline in oil period, fossil fuel products. They're basically including things like gas and unrefined oil in that decline in consumption. So even though, yeah, I mean, we do need oil for plastics, we need oil for certain things, but actually we don't need it anywhere near as much as what these fossil fuel companies are, well, they're trying to tell you. Aviation fuel consumption, on the other hand, will rise by up to 70% to almost 61 million tonnes, it says. But the report, I believe, did not analyze the reality that some of these aviation companies are actually going electric. CATL, the world's biggest battery company, they now have a battery called the condensed battery, which has an energy density of up to 500 watt hours per kilogram. Elon Musk has mentioned numerous times that you only need a battery with 400 watt hours per kilogram to make basically jumbo jets, enormous 747s, be able to fly using batteries. So the industry will pivot away from aviation fuel because aviation fuel is exceptionally freaking expensive. Powering your plane battery, which will be swappable, they'll swap the batteries out so the next people can fly off quickly. Powering your plane battery will cost a fraction of what it costs with aviation fuel. An electric plane would be much, much cheaper to run. A decline in oil demand in the People's Republic would have a major impact on climate protection, says Spiegel in Germany. China is by far the world's largest emitter of CO2. However, the political leadership has been trying to reduce greenhouse gas emissions for years. And it's not just about saving the planet. It's more about making people stop dying prematurely from all these fumes in cities in China. They know they can save enormous amounts of money if they reduce all the toxic fumes that we're producing. So that is really, I think, one of the key drivers here. Beijing is relying heavily on electricity generation from wind and solar. Approvals for coal power plants in the last 12 months fell in China by 83% after falling by 86% in the 6 months prior to that. The country is also aiming to become an international leader in electric cars, and obviously it is the leader, and that's the key reason why China is now the largest exporter of cars worldwide. It was only a few years ago, it was fourth, behind California, behind Japan, behind Germany. Well, now it's first. Their CO2 balance is still affected on the domestic market by the fact that electricity is generated from coal more than renewables, but that is changing very, very quickly. In July of this year, for the first time, more cars with purely battery electric and plug-in hybrids drivetrains were registered in China than vehicles with purely combustion vehicles. They hit 50%. That's clearly the tipping point. It's believed that by 2026, China will hit between 70 to 80%. This reduced China's need to import crude oil for the production of gasoline. There are now around 30 million electric cars on the roads in China, which is around 10% of all registered vehicles. In addition, the ongoing economic weakness is having an effect on oil consumption, but not as much as what economists would be telling you. It's more about a change in the types of cars that people are actually using. If the entire distance traveled by electric vehicles had been driven on gasoline, China's gasoline demand would have been 14% higher this year, and total oil demand would have been about 3% higher, estimates energy analyst Lauri Miliverda from the Center for Research on Energy and Clean Air said in Helsinki. He's referring to the period from January to October 2024. The numbers are probably higher than that for November, December because of the fact that the percentage of vehicles sold in November, December will be higher in terms of the swing towards EVs. Analyst Ciaran Healy of the International Energy Agency, the IEA, had already said in early December that demand for fuels in China would fall this year. This was reported by the news agency Reuters. Demand began to stagnate even as early as 2023. Experts say the turnaround could mark the end of China's decades-long role as the main driver of global oil consumption. Growth will stall worldwide. It will fall. It will be fascinating to see how the geopolitics play out, and I'll be talking about that on this channel over the coming years. The transition to electric mobility in China is coming much faster than expected, says Germany, meaning the nation will need to import less crude oil to produce gasoline. Analysts contacted by Reuters expect China's crude oil imports to have peaked in 2024. Besides air transport, the petrochemical industry remains the only sector that could support oil demand in the coming years. However, the demand for the raw material naphtha, which is derived from petroleum and liquefied petroleum gas, or LPG, both of which are needed for petrochemicals, could increase by 2030. Overall, though, experts predict and they expect that China's total oil demand will continue to fall. And like I said before, one of the highest ranked executives at China's largest oil company predicts that oil consumption, it's already peaked. It's going to go down by 5% every year and then 10% after that. Now, obviously, it won't be eliminated. We still need oil. But we don't need anywhere near as much as what we're using today. And I believe oil consumption will fall in the world's largest economy by about 80%, which is much more than they're predicting, by 2035. What do you think? Let me know your thoughts in the comments.